Now I'm going to introduce Aysja. So Aysja's academic background is in neuro and cognitive science. Now she's learning biology to understand entities that can get reality to warp to their goals. She's interested in how life manages to robustly hit narrow targets, what exactly levels of abstraction are, and how life uses them, and what the dial is that causes agency to vary across different systems. Aysja, whenever you're ready. Um, and Urta, if you can stop sharing and turn your video off.
Okay.
And as a reminder, people
Okay.
can submit questions to the Q&A using the Q&A option rather than the chat option.
Okay, I'm really sorry. It's saying that I have to quit and reopen to share my screen. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm here to talk about what I want a science of life to look like. Um, it's a little bit different than the thing I originally pitched for the Symposium, but I think still fairly related. So the three main points I want to hit is that, for one, I think that life is pretty strange. Two, we don't understand it. And three, that we could. And the way that we could do that is with science. Um, so this talk is going to go like pretty high level, pretty fast. So probably there's some like inferential distance that I'm not crossing for people in the audience. I'm sorry ahead of time for that. I still think there's, some interesting nuggets here. So, okay, I want to be like, life is obviously really weird. Um, the most obviously weird thing is like it can do stuff. Like me right now, I'm talking to you, I'm moving around. Uh, most other things can't really do that. Rocks can't do that. Um, and for most of history, or like the last, few thousand years, people looked at this difference between the living world and the non-living world, and they were like, well, maybe life is just like a fundamentally different kind of thing. Like Aristotle is like, maybe it has a soul. A more modern version is like maybe there's some elan vital or something like this that's separating life from everything else. And of course, now uh, we know that that's wrong. Life is part and parcel of the natural world, just like everything else. But I think there's like a little bit of a weird move that people make after this kind of update, which is like, well, so life is a physical thing. Uh, we like sort of basically understand fundamental physics, and like we have the wave equation, we can talk about particles and stuff, and like life is fundamentally made out of particles, so maybe we understand life too. And I'm like, this seems really wrong to me. A lot of the talk is just saying like, how this seems wrong to me. Um, but for now, I want to say like, I think the vitalists were wrong in their explanation, but I think they were really right that there's something really weird going on here. Um, and I want to focus on that. So like, life is physical, but it's still doing stuff, and I don't really feel like I can say why. So in particular, just to like zoom in a little bit on what I mean by like life is weird, it's doing stuff. Here are some things that I think are weird, that I don't feel are well explained by current paradigms, and it's very far from a complete list, but just jump right in. One thing, like development, very weird. So I think like sort of the clearest, this comes into like sharper focus with like eggs becoming chickens to me, because the the atomic composition of the egg as it's becoming a chicken doesn't change like basically at all. Like almost all the components are there. Um, but like somehow this process of development, like starting with just basically like some DNA and proteins and stuff, takes all of the yolk and egg white molecules and like transforms them into a chicken, with heart and like a brain, and like it's like able to do computation, and it's like there's this really wild thing going on. Just like zoomed out, that's pretty weird. But some in particular, some weird things about it is like the chicken is like really big relative to what its parts, like cells, molecules, and stuff. And it's a really bottom up process. Like it really starts with kind of like, just the genetic material. But like it really robustly hits this narrow target in the sense that like there's a ton of ways the atoms in the egg could be arranged. Not many of them are chicken, but like this like crazy like small to massive bottom up thing is robustly doing that. I think that's really weird, and like obviously DNA regulatory network things like this are involved in this, and we have like some concepts here, but I still feel like there's some key things that aren't explained. um Another thing, like for now I'm calling simple actions aren't, so like it's sort of related to development, but like everything I'm doing right now and like everything I ever do really is like, I'm coordinating the activity of, I don't know, lot like trillions, hundreds of thousands of trillions or something of atoms. And like they all like kind of do what I want or something when I'm moving my body. And so like simple actions aren't just kind of the idea that like, well, me moving my hand feels very like intuitive or something, but actually it's like a pretty crazy amount of like stuff that I'm doing to reality every time I do it. um and so like yeah, I think yeah, part of my fascination is something like, well, what how is the universe structured such that like we can get these patterns of control out of it, and like what has to go right for me to be able to like to coordinate this much matter this reliably or something. um and so yeah, so I call this like atomic operas. But also one of the weird things here is not just that I'm like controlling so much, but that like a small thing is controlling so much. So like the thoughts to move my hand or something, wherever that's located in my neurons or whatever, is like a bunch smaller than like the thing that's actually like going on in reality, which is like, my entire limb moving or whatever. Similarly, like if I ask my friend to get me the salt or something, like my words are like in some sense small, or like don't require that much work or something, but I like get this whole thing out of it. Like, she like brings me the salt through space, and that's like pretty wild, I claim. Okay, final thing in this section. Some bits appear to be more leveraged than others. I feel like this is a pretty important like observation and pretty core to what is going on with life and intelligence and stuff. But yeah, basically just like a very quick thought experiment. So if you have like two boxes in front of you, uh, figuring out like if the contents are in one box or the other is like a one bit question. Um, but the contents of the boxes can vary. So like there could be like just like an atom in one of the boxes, and so you like get the one bit of information about which box it's in. You're like, I don't really care, that's not that exciting. Some maybe there's like an orange, and now you have like a bunch of free energy or something that you didn't have before. That's like kind of useful. Maybe in this thought experiment it's like a button that if you press you get to like have your like favorite world state or something. So like obviously the same like bit is like doing a lot more work in different circumstances. And I think that that's like pinning down what this means feels like an important step to me in understanding like I don't know, life and intelligence, things like this. Okay, so that's some strange things. I claim life's pretty weird, and I don't think that we understand it. Um, so there's um there's a lot of explanatory frameworks around life, obviously. Um, I think that a lot of them, like the way people talk about them, it often claims to have more explanatory reach than it in fact does. So like a common thing I hear is like, but isn't it just X or something? And like X is a lot of things. But like just to drill down into one example, like, but isn't life just evolution? Like all these things. So, you know, intelligence is a thing, but like, can we just explain intelligence? Because I don't know, like more intelligent things were fitter than non-intelligent things. And so they get selected for, and like, so yeah, of course you're going to see like this thing emerge from this, you know, algorithmic process. And I'm like, yeah, like of course natural selection is going to be a part of like any explanation of what's going on with life, basically. But like it's obviously not the whole thing. Like evolution does not tell me how intelligence works or what it is, and like it doesn't really tell me that for like any feature you choose. Like, why does my brain get to control my hand? I don't know. Sure, like probably that was helpful, then like gave me higher fitness or something, or gave, you know, my ancestors. But like it doesn't really give me anything more than that. And I think there's like a lot of such like things that this happens with, like, you know, I often hear people say like, oh, neural networks are just, you know, matrix multiplication or just gradient descent or something. And like, sure. And like brains are just neural firing, but like we don't really understand how to talk about them. And it's like not the right level of abstraction. And we're like missing a lot of key things here. Um, so yeah, you know, don't have time to get into all these, but I think that basically like, you know, a bunch of these like frameworks are doing a lot of explanatory work, but they're not doing all of it. And I think that there's like a lot of stuff left that we do not get about life. So life is weird. We don't understand it. Um, like oftentimes we kind of think or pretend that we do, but we don't. But like, what do we do when we're like trying to like actually figure out what's going on? I think that one first step is like noticing confusion. Um, so right now, I don't know. I kind of came up with this distinction like a couple of days ago. It's kind of similar to like paradigmatic versus like pre-paradigmatic thought or something, but uh, I don't know. I don't really like those words. But so yeah, I think that there's a sort of difference in how you can approach the problem where you're like, okay, well, like on-frame confusion is more like, well, we have a paradigm, but we're like trying to sort of like fill out the details or something, or like have some confusion of like exactly how it plays out. Like maybe RL is a good explanation for human behavior, but like what exactly is the discounting factor that people use or something? Um, that's more, yeah, so that's like kind of like more on model or like on frame or something. Then there's like what I'm calling off frame confusion, which is harder to gesture at, but it's like, I don't know, no, the like framework is wrong. Like we need to like step back, like figure out why it's wrong, and then like try to, you know, think of new ways to describe things. So I think this sort of like, I think we like really don't understand a lot of, you know, a lot of things that are going on with like life and agency and stuff. And I think that the first step is sort of getting more into this like off frame confusion of like, let's like step back and like just kind of rethink things more from the ground up. Okay, so yeah, so far like life is weird. We don't understand that weirdness, and how do we do that? I think the way that you figure out like phenomena generally is with the process of science. um so yeah, basically I'm like, look, like science, I don't know, I'm not going to explain like what, you know, the totality of science is to in like 2 minutes or whatever, but like basically like science is for understanding the gears that move the world, where like uh I don't have like a precise, you know, way to say what exactly such a gear is, but it's like, I don't know, like science is for trying to find like simple explanations that reach far, like Newtonian mechanics, you know, three simple like laws, and they explain a bunch of stuff. And it's sort of like you don't really get the world unless you kind of get Newtonian mechanics, and you don't like, it's sort of like kind of what makes the universe tick, or something like this. There's like, it feels like a gear. And I'm like, man, life just like really feels like a gear to me. Like, and for one, it's just like, it seems very obvious to me that there are a bunch of like deep regularities here when I look at like across biology and then like, into other agentic systems. But like also like, I don't know, this point is like a little weirder or something, but I'm like, I just really feel like agents, if we play our cards right, like are going to govern the fate of most matter in the universe at some point. And like at that point, I'm like, man, it really feels like there's just like something pretty like deep and like universe going on here. And I think that like science is for understanding things like this. So yeah, I think that life deserves a proper science. Um, roughly like what is the project of science? Isolating underlying causal mechanisms. So like people noticed for a long time, heat moves stuff. That's weird. But it wasn't until like, Carnot and really understanding like difference in temperature is what like, provides work, is when we could start like really like understanding and like controlling systems. So, partially we're like trying to find underlying causal mechanisms, and also this like lets us measure things, which is, a really important aim, I think, of science, and to control them. So yeah, this is kind of like, this is like what science is. I think that we could do this with life. Um, so yeah, just to like, back up again, I'm like, look, there's a bunch of these words like goals, intelligence, optimization, myopia, like all these things, which, I like a little bit bicker with the words or whatever, but like there's a bunch of these things that we just like do not understand like remotely in the scientific sense. Like we do not know the underlying causal mechanisms, we cannot measure them, and we can't control them. And that's like kind of bad. It's like a bad situation to be in, because like currently we are building something that we don't understand, that like may well come to have a bunch of these properties, and like we don't know what to do with it or how to control it. And I like, yeah, that seems bad. It seems like we should be like actually really trying here to figure out what it is in the way that like, has historically worked in the past, like having a science. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my pitch. Then it's like, well, but biology is so messy. So I think oftentimes when I'm like articulating this, people will like retort with something like this, like, well, like life, like, yeah, life and agency and stuff just like isn't really amenable to science, because it's like not crisp or like clean. It's like kind of this like messy domain. Yeah, I guess I'm a phrase that I hear a lot in biology, which is just like really baffling to me, is like there are no general theories in biology, because biology is just chemistry, which is just physics. Um, this view, I think, is like smuggling in a lot of different ideas, but like just to go over, a few of them, like I think that there's kind of this view that like all further concepts to be understood, or like all like high level concepts, like at like the human level or something, are fuzzy and like not really candidates of science. So like if you imagine that like we really understand fundamental physics well, we can like, say exactly what particles are going to be doing in such and such a situation. Like the further you like zooming out from that, like to chemistry and then biology and then God knows, so psychology, like the further you're getting from kind of like a ground truth accuracy thing, and the fuzzier they get, the more subjective and like laden with human bias and stuff. Um, so yeah, I think this was like claiming some like, you know, like basically like all high level concepts are like equally fuzzy, like in the sense that baldness is a fuzzy thing. Like, um, and I'm like, that's just not true. Like so for one, most like scientific concepts start fuzzy. and they become unfuzzy through the process of science. And there's like a further question of like which concepts that you're looking at that like have some fuzziness will be, you know, candidates for becoming clearer. And like baldness is like obviously not one of these candidates. Um, and like I don't really have like a good like, you know, reason that like to say it's true, but it's just going back to like the gears that move the world. It's like baldness just like isn't really a fundamental thing. It's not like, you know, it's not something that's like part and parcel of the natural world or something. Like, but some things are like, you know, heat was like that. And I think that life is like this. So yeah, basically I think this view like kind of conflates like all human level concepts as having like kind of the same degree of fuzziness and like irrem like uh yeah, like, and they can't the same amount of like not being able to get unfuzzy, and I think it's just like wrong. Also weirdly like feel like this anti-predicts natural selection, which seems like a pretty big red flag to me, because that's a general theory, biology. Okay, so relatedly, maybe it's like the same point, I'm not sure, but like I think there's this intuition that like, well, the further you get it, like, I know sometimes people sort of like rank the sciences or something. It's like there's physics and then like kind of get like further away from that. And like, um, the further away you are, like kind of the less accurate, the more like, I don't know, bad, basically the sciences. So I'm like, I don't know exactly what this like distance metric is measuring, but I think that part of it at least is something like, okay, like the intuition that, you know, science is for understanding universal and like general things about the world. And like, so when you're like, you know, zoomed in and looking at like particles or something, uh, particles are everywhere. So you can be pretty sure that if you're understanding particles, you're like understanding something really deep about the universe. But as you're kind of like zooming out and like looking at like more like special cases or something of matter, like life is just like a particular organization of these things. And I think it's like it feels less obvious that there's like a general thing here. I think. I think that's part of the intuition. I'm not sure. That's a guess. Um, to which I'm like, all right, crazy speculation. This is my like intuition is that it's not life is not just some like byproduct of random chance that happened. Like there's like of course like a sense in which that's part of the story, but like I think that fundamentally life is like some continuation of, I don't know, it's like my most speculative claim by far, whatever. But like, you know, some forceful orders and some part of the thing that's like, you know, making all of the other like crazily ordered, like, you know, open thermodynamic systems do their thing, like stars and galaxies and all this stuff that like uh I don't know. I feel like my like intuition is that life is more like a continuation of something like this rather than just like some random, you know, one-off thing that happened. And in that world, I'm like, it's just like really part of physics. Like you just like really want to explain it as a very like natural science in the same way that like, you know, the branch of physics is describing the world is this like fundamental natural science. Okay, another intuition here I think is like, well, life is really contingent. Like evolution is super ad hoc, tons of pros and accidents. If you like replayed the tape of life a billion times, it'd be like different almost every time. Um, yeah, I don't like really have time to disagree with this. Oh my God, yeah, I really don't have time. Okay, but yeah, I don't think that. Okay, so also just like open up a biology textbook, it looks like really scary and bad. And I'm like, yes, I agree. I've looked at them. They're really messy. But also like practically every field looks really messy before we understand what the regularities are. And like I have to call it like historical listicles or whatever. Like there's like so many random and sprawling ontologies, like basically every concept that we had before we formalized it. Okay, so going pretty fast through this last slide. So I want like a proper science of life. This is like some of my guesses and like sort of my pitch, I guess, about like what that the shape of that might look like at a very high level. Um, so my best guess, science of life is going to ground out in a science of abstraction. Um, why do I think this? I don't know, like a bunch of the things I said at the beginning, like small things seem like they get to control a bunch of big things, and some bits seem like they have way more power or something than others. And I don't can't really get into right now like what the relationship that has with abstractions or whatever, but like it's something like they feel like deeply related to me or something in this way that feels like it grounds out in abstraction. So my guess is that abstractions are going to be like really important to describing what's going on with life. Also, like just some aims or like desiderata of what the science might look like is like I want it to be mechanistic, not behaviorist. I want it to be physical, like describing the world, general theories, and like from the agent's point of view. So it's just like, briefly get into these things. Like a lot of concepts start behaviorist, like people just describe like what they like see, the outputs of the thing or whatever. But like the goal of science is to find like causal mechanisms and the gears, so to speak. And so I'm like, sure, like, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people seem like kind of content to like understand neural networks in a behaviorist way. I'm like, okay, this should not be the aim, I feel like the aim, maybe we start there, but the aim should be to find like the underlying mechanism. Uh Also like, yeah, science should be trying to describe the world. Um, computation is like a means to do that, but it shouldn't be like the ultimate aim. I want them to be like general theories that apply, not just like my interest in life is like it is like a subset of this thing, agency. Don't really like that word, but it's like I want to understand like generalizations of agency. So I would like to understand general theories here. Um, Very quickly, like from the agent's point of view, I don't know, like I'm not gesturing at the thing quite correctly yet, but it's like something like when like biology focused on the gene, they like sort of forgot the organism existed or something. It was just like a vehicle for like the genes to update or whatever. And like computational, like really high level computational approaches also similarly to me feel like they like a little bit forgot that like the agent is a thing that's like in the environment doing stuff. And so I'm really wanting to focus on like, okay, I want to be able to describe what's happening from like the agent's point of view, what it's actually encountering and thinking and seeing and stuff. Okay, where to start? I think biology is a good place. Really undertapped resource in my opinion. Lots of reasons for this. Like really quickly, basically, I just when you're like trying to understand things like off frame, so to speak, I think you like want to start with the least assumptions as possible about what details are relevant. Um, and that means like you want as direct access as possible to the phenomena, which is biology, like ML, AI, all these like frameworks have already made decisions about what things are relevant. And biology hasn't. Biology's just there, just doing stuff. So yeah, I think like basically getting as close to that as possible is good. Okay, I went over. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aysja, for that very refreshing talk. We don't have any questions on the Q&A thing, and we have about a minute left.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to take that minute to go over. Well, we have a question right now. So Martin asks, regarding life as a continuation of a fundamental force for order, any ideas on what abstraction layer, quote unquote, this process would inhabit? Like clearly it doesn't happen at the quark level, right? But it seems to span many scales. Would it have a similar flavor to the macroscopic arrow of time?
Whoa. I okay, I guess like I feel like levels of abstraction is like I'm not sure that's the right way to think about it or something. But okay, I think I kind of like lost track of the question a little bit. Like, what level of abstraction will this?
You want me to repeat it?
Yeah.
So regarding life as a continuation of a fundamental force for order, any ideas on what abstraction layer this process would inhabit? It doesn't happen at the quark level, but it seems to span many scales. would have a similar flavor to the arrow of time?
I So I don't like have a good answer to this. I think I'm still trying to figure out what all of these words mean. But like, yeah, I guess I'm just back to say like I feel like it's like a little bit confusing. Like there's, Hofstadter talks a lot about abstractions, and I am a stranger. It's like, well, like the atoms don't know that they're part of, a human or whatever. They're just like doing the like atom thing, and like the human is some like weird like fuzzy, you know macroscopic things like layered on top. And like I feel like I know like it kind of like goes all the way down. Like the fact that I can like move my hand like in some sense means that like the atoms in it are like I don't know what to talk about like knowing, but they're like clearly like part of the structure or something. And like that structure goes like all the way through. Um so yeah, I guess I don't know. Maybe that's not answering
Well,
your
that's a
question
great
at
place
all.
to stop, I think, because we're at
Okay.
time. But thank you very much, Aysja, and also everybody for joining and whoever stayed till the end.